Ba 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 Barbaran. Ba 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 Barbaran. Oh ba 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 Barbaran.
Everyone has their own version of the same song, a variation on that old theme, a story about those first days of teenage freedom, of rebellion, of acceptance, the loss of innocence, an emergence of self. The coming-of-age story is one of the most recognisable and recurring genres in cinema because it's a story we will all live and one day look back on. In American Graffiti and Dazed and Confused, George Lucas and Richard Linklater revisit the days of their own youth in blatant acts of nostalgia. These films are twins in structure, style and intention. Both follow large casts of teenagers over the course of one day and night, one on the first day of summer vacation, the other on the last. They are both backward-looking, highly autobiographical snapshots of their eras, and are as densely populated as a high school yearbook. They are memoir mosaics of 1962 and 1976, with the clear ambition to encapsulate the youth culture of their respective time periods. I want to examine how these films depict the symbols and rites of passage that are unique to their eras, and I also want to interrogate them as self-conscious works of nostalgia, and discover why this mode of remembrance is so powerful and so irresistible. All coming-of-age stories are about transitions, from childhood to adolescence, from adolescence to adulthood, from captivity to freedom, from freedom to responsibility. But one does not pass from one state to the other in an instant. We must navigate the rituals of growing up, guided along by those who have done so before us. These are the rites of passage that American Graffiti and Dazed and Confused are consumed by. These films are not distracted by plot or the perspective of single characters. Focus glides between perspectives and various states of transition. A large part of what makes the nostalgic elements in these films so memorable is the focus on little details. It's a screwdriver wedged in the doorway of a teenage bedroom. It's watching television sets through a window on Main Street, the way competing baseball teams congratulate each other at the end of a game, and the neon signs at the roller service drive-in. These specific recollections are instantly relatable, not because we've all stuck a screwdriver in our doorway, but because we all understand the teenage need for privacy that this moment suggests. Through the accumulation of details like this, the eras depicted feel lived in and real. And they are real. These are clear, personal moments of recollection. Both Linklater and Lucas admit that their films were highly inspired by their own teen years. Lucas even sets American Graffiti in his hometown of Modesto, California, and Linklater takes us to an anonymous Texas suburb where many of the characters share names with the director's real-life classmates. By mining their own personal memories, these directors find the universal within the subjective. Drawing focus towards the little things is what makes them so relatable. Nobody's anecdotes resemble the plot of a 90-minute film, but we can all see our own memories in these flashes from another time, even if they are little more than a glimpse from the passenger side window. From the 1950s onwards, the car became the symbol of American freedom. In American Graffiti, Milner is essentially a small-town celebrity because of his ability behind the wheel and under the hood. Without college prospects, his identity is built around having the fastest car in Modesto. When Steve gifts Toad with the keys to his 1958 Chevrolet Impala, it's much more than a mode of transport. The keys to the Impala also unlock the possibilities of sex, status, and a good time. In American Graffiti's version of the 1960s, cruising is a stone-cold necessity of teenage experience.
Yeah, I met her once at a Dick Clark roadshow.
Yeah, you really think I look like her?
Similarly, for the girls in the film, riding in cars with boys is a transitional rite. Carol has a number of established expectations for her first night cruising around town with a boy, even if she is too young to understand the implications of it. She is confident, but clueless in how to negotiate the moment she has convinced herself will be life-changing. Here we see the power of nostalgia works both ways. Other people's stories of former glories can influence how we approach our own, and this inevitably leads to disappointment. By the time we get to 1976 in Dazed and Confused, much has changed, but the car retains its cultural cachet. Wooderson stands in front of his exposed motor with his fingers in his belt loops, spilling jargon like it costs 40 cents on the gallon. The car continues as an object of male bravado, and the trick still works. Despite his reputation as the guy who stuck around town past his prime, his driver-side charm still holds. But the car is more than a status symbol. In both films it serves as an autonomous social space where teenagers are free from the rules that restrict them everywhere else. The car represents sex, freedom and friendship, all essential ingredients required to run the engines of teenage nostalgia. In America, you can drive a car from the day of your 16th birthday, but buying beer legally is a different matter. The buying beer for the party scene is a staple of the coming-of-age genre, and Linklater and Lucas both approach it as an essential rite of passage. It is a way for the characters to prove themselves, with varying degrees of success. Toad fails more than once, needing to borrow money from the girl he's trying to impress.
Are you for real? Come on. Girls don't pay, guys pay.
Yeah, well...
As Debbie explains, there is always an established expectation to these rights, and failure to meet them can be disastrous.
I really cannot believe this.
In contrast, middle schooler Mitch coolly succeeds in the challenge of acquiring beer. He gives a calm performance in front of the till, and when he returns with the beer in hand, he has earned the respect of the older kids. For the most part, this is the function of a rite of passage. They are tests of maturity, status, and most importantly, whether you know how to have a good time.
Say, man, you got a joint?
No, not on me, man.
It'd be a lot cooler if you did.
But rites of passage can be insidious too. They can also be used to reinforce established hierarchies. They are repeated rituals designed to legitimize structural authority, and nowhere is this better encapsulated than the cruel rituals of abuse inflicted on the middle schoolers in Dazed and Confused. The boys are famously hunted down by paddle-wielding seniors, and the girls are treated like hot dogs and forced to propose to the older boys. They are ritual humiliations that establish the pecking order, but they are also paths to acceptance. Both Mitch and Sabrina need to suffer through these rituals before the older kids take them under their wing. In similar fashion, Kurt is picked up by a gang of greasers called the Pharaohs in American Graffiti, who subject him to a series of tests to see if he's worthy of a place in their gang. And these are the rites of passage that carry the most weight, those that fly in the face of adult society. A profound sense of acceptance that is found only in shared behaviour that isn't accepted outside the group. Lucas and Linklater's films stand the test of time because they use specific and personal memories charged with universal feelings, relatable to anyone who is or once was a teenager. The years that pass between the settings of these two films is a mere 14 years, but that may as well be a century in cultural time. The gulf that separates 1962 and 1976 is filled by both Kennedy assassinations, Vietnam, MLK, LSD, Woodstock and Watergate. As such, the cultural norms of these teenagers are almost comically distinct. American Graffiti's nostalgic power is so strong because it depicts a world that had entirely vanished by the film's release date. The 1960s passed and demolished the world of hot rods and roller skate drive-ins. George Lucas said this was a big part of why he made the film, to preserve a historical moment he felt was at risk of erasure. In Dazed and Confused, the 60s may be long over, but their impact is keenly felt. Abraham Lincoln has pot eyes and the kids are getting laid. Punk was just about to cut itself into the cultural landscape, but it was nowhere visible on the horizon. The 60s was a tidal wave that these characters are still living in the wake of. It's absurd to deny the impact of the 60s, but is there an era more effectively drowned in its own nostalgia? As pleasurable as nostalgia is, it is also parasitic. It is a bittersweet mode of remembrance, a state of being glad that something happened, but mournful that it can never be repeated. The idealised past it creates can only flourish in comparison to the present. The game is always fixed in the past's favour because of how we cherry-pick the very best details to compete with a raw, unedited now. Many psychologists believe that after enough time, we no longer retain any direct memories of our childhood. Instead, what we remember is our own remembering. Appropriately enough, Freud actually called these instances screen memories in an essay of the same title in 1899. And this is what Linklater and Lucas give us, a series of screen memories. They are unapologetic in their romanticism, but this habit extends to their characters as well. The characters in both films are already caught up in the act of glorifying their recent past.
I remember about 5 years ago, take you a couple hours, tank full of gas just to make one circuit. It's really something.
Milner mournfully recalls a time not long ago when rock and roll was real.
Why'd you do that?
I don't like that surfing shit. Rock and roll's been going downhill ever since Buddy Holly died.
And yet those same songs are still playing on his and other people's radio throughout the film. And in what is perhaps the best line in Linklater's film, Cynthia presents her every other decade theory.
You know, the 50s were boring, the 60s rocked, the 70s, oh my god, they obviously suck, right? Come on. Maybe the 80s will be radical, you know? I think
the irony of her statement is that most of these characters will see the 70s as a veritable counterculture paradise in comparison to the decade to come. The obvious but salient fact is that every era can seem glorious when viewed through the prism of nostalgia. If you cast your mind back to the Wordsworth quote I put up at the beginning, the time he's talking about is his years spent in France as a young man, during the upheaval of the Terror and the French Revolution. Nostalgia then is to lay the tracks of narrative over the chaos and disorder of our memories. In American Graffiti we see this in action. Toad looks back on the night we have seen him experience and he's despondent, feeling that the night is a failure. But Debbie is able to paint the night differently for him.
I really had a good time. When you picked me up and we got some hard stuff and saw a hold up, and then we went to the canal, you got your car stolen, and then I got to watch you getting sick, and then we got in this really bitchin' fight. I really had a good time.
Yeah, well, I guess I have a pretty good time just about every night.
It wasn't a failure, it was an adventure. And this is the power of nostalgia. It can transform a barbarous and fearful night into the best of your life. It's all a matter of perspective. In Dazed and Confused, a similar exchange is shared between Mike and Cynthia about the fight that Mike initiated and lost at the party. At one point, crestfallen and humiliated, Mike is able to spin it into a story, even comparing himself to Hemingway by the end of the conversation. Nostalgia is a form of self-delusion, and this isn't news, we all know this. At the end of Dazed and Confused, Pink makes a definite declaration against this way of seeing things.
Well, look, man, all I'm saying is that if I ever start referring to these as the best years of my life, remind me to kill myself.
To older ears, this can sound like the arrogance of youth, but this is a mirror of nostalgic thinking. Pink can idealise his future because it's far away, in the same way that we can better idealise the past the further it recedes past the end zone. Like love, nostalgia is more than something we feel. It's something that we must do. We must perform in order to make it real. It is an act which allows us to retrieve and reshape our past in order to build a version of ourselves that we can live with. We are all our own biographers, and nostalgia grants us the ability to tell ourselves a story that we can believe and take pride in.